Welcome to Mom Friend Material with Cherie
and Jada. So we have another week with a great guest. We got to meet thanks to our daughters becoming fast besties. And when I found out what she did as a profession, I was like, I want to be her friend too. I want her Wi-Fi password. That's how my daughter went up to her and met her for the first time because she wanted a play date. But this is my new, hopefully one day bestie, Miss Michelle Reyes, and she is a therapist. And what is your specific form of expertise as far as therapy goes?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, and then I am a certified perinatal mental health specialist. So I work with women that are going through the family building process, and that can include infertility, pregnancy loss, infant loss, complications during pregnancy, and then mood disorders during and after pregnancy up to the first year of life.
Okay. So, what are some of the things that you feel like you see most often right now with just the world just feeling like it's just so hard with these people growing their families? What are you seeing the most of?
Sure. I think since COVID and the world shutting down and birth processes changing and everything else, it's been a lot of really anxious moms that are not feeling supported, moms that are stressed and overwhelmed, which I think any mom can relate to, right?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
But there was actually a study that came out from the University of Michigan that collected new data on the prevalence of perinatal mood disorders. And prior to COVID, there were two different studies. One was 1 in 5 and one was 1 in 7 moms experience a mood disorder during or after pregnancy. This new study collected data during COVID, and that rate went up to 1 in 3.
Wow.
And so we don't know if it's going to go back down, right? A lot has changed in the world, but that's the data we're working off of right now. So 1 in 3 women experience anxiety, depression, OCD, or very rarely psychosis during or after pregnancy.
So I struggled a lot in my pregnancy. It was so strange to me because I never really struggled with depression. I realized that I have struggled with anxiety my entire life, but it just didn't really make itself totally known to me until pregnancy. And so what would you say would be some good, like, how do you recognize that? Because it took me a long time and I suffered. Like, I feel like I honestly have some PTSD from being pregnant because it was so intense. I had a lot of depression. The anxiety was like nearly debilitating. But I didn't really, it took me a long time to recognize exactly what was happening. So what would you say, like, what are some trigger points of, like, if you were feeling this way, if you were thinking these things, like, as a mom who did experience that during pregnancy, like, how do you recognize that early on and kind of advocate for yourself to get the help you need with your doctor?
Sure. First of all, I'm so sorry that you went through that. And I'm so thankful that the field is becoming more prevalent because I think
Yeah.
a lot of moms have gone through these things and not had the help. And if they're not treated, they're not going to resolve. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like you hit the 1 year mark and it goes away.
Yeah.
I think big things to look for are changes in your ability to function at your job, feeling like you are overwhelmed to the point of not being able to function and caring for your new baby, panic attacks, and a big one is just women will come in and say, I don't feel like me.
Yeah.
I can't quite put a pin on it, but I don't feel like me.
Yeah.
Something is different. If you're having trouble sleeping, if your eating habits are changing, those are big ones to look out for. And then
Yeah.
obviously any thoughts of self-harm are a big indicator that something is going on.
Yeah.
Right? And if you come to a professional with thoughts of self-harm, that's not going to immediately raise the alarms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a thing with perinatal anxiety and sometimes OCD called intrusive thoughts, which
Yeah.
is kind of a big trending word right now. It's something
Yeah.
that's becoming more mainstream. But it's basically these thoughts that do not fit with your normal psyche. They don't feel comfortable when you have them, but they don't make sense.
Yeah.
So thoughts of like, I just want to run away, or my family would be better off without me. Thoughts like that that could be perceived as suicidal thoughts, right?
Yeah.
But really, it's your body trying to process what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the big indicator that it's not a concern is if it does not feel good to think that,
Yeah.
right? I don't like this. It makes me anxious. It doesn't feel good. But a lot of women will hold those thoughts back because they're scared of what's going to happen
Yeah.
if they're brought up to a professional.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that after, and it's so funny. So me and my sister had babies 5 weeks apart, so we went through almost our whole pregnancies together, and it was really eye opening to see the difference. Going through it with my sister,
Sure.
and I remember rocking Levi at probably, I don't know, 8 weeks old. We had kind of made it through, and we struggled a lot with his health in those early days. And I remember telling her, like, oh, I feel like it's probably pretty normal to feel like these fears of like, what happens if like my husband leaves and goes to the store and gets in a wreck and dies? Like, those were thoughts that I was having. And when I voiced it, I honestly didn't realize that it wasn't normal because I was just like, oh, it's from, the baby blues or whatever. And I was on medication at this point to kind of help curb some of the things I experienced during pregnancy. But she was like, that is not normal. And that was the first kind of cue that I was like, that's not, you don't have those thoughts. And she's like, no. I'm like, oh. And it was really like eye-opening in that moment. And so I do feel like, that's whenever I started researching, I'm like, oh, this is like intrusive thoughts. So I think so many women, and you just don't, when it's your first baby, I think you write
no idea what to
you write a
expect.
lot of stuff off because you're like, well, I'm feeling this way probably because of hormones or whatnot. I mean, do you feel like that's pretty common that we as
I think
women?
that's very common, and I think if we as a society spoke up more about what the postpartum experience looks like,
Yeah.
women probably wouldn't get as worked up about it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you know what you're going into, you know what the possibilities are,
Yeah.
there's a lot less chance of being like, oh, this is a problem,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like, okay, I can reach out for help. I can do the things I need to do.
Yeah.
But those thoughts can range from what if I drop the baby? What if the
Mhm.
baby drowns in the bathtub? To, what if my husband gets in a car accident? What if I just walked away from all of this? What
Yeah.
would that look like?
Yeah.
And so that kind of delineates the key aspect of a lot of women's experience with anxiety postpartum is
Yeah.
these thoughts that they get that they're just like, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but now I can't stop.
Yeah. It really is true. I think once you kind of, that door gets cracked, it's hard to shut it, So for a mom that is feeling these things, and maybe they listen to this and they were like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize this was a problem. Like, what are some ways that they can get help through? Obviously you can go to your OB, which is what I did, and I did get some good help. But I think that I look back now and I'm like, man, there probably were so many more resources that our OBs are specialists at delivering our babies and that kind of stuff. But I think we sometimes expect too much from them on that full scale. So like, what would be your recommendation of like, what kind of professionals do they need to be seeking out in addition to that OB help?
Sure. So there's a really good website. It's Postpartum Support International's website, and they're kind of the leading researchers and advocates and trainers for the perinatal realm of mental health.
Yeah.
And their website is postpartum.net. And on there, there's really good, just general information about perinatal mood disorders. There's a tab for families and a tab for like professionals. So you can go on the family side of things, kind of get an idea of what perinatal mood disorders look like.
Yeah.
You can see different examples of different families, and that helps you to feel a little less alone.
Yeah.
And then you can also search for a provider who is trained in perinatal mental health right on there. and you can find providers all over the world. So if somebody's listening that's not in Louisiana,
Yeah.
they can still find a provider that way. The important thing I think to look for is a provider that has gone through the certification process. A lot of mental health providers don't understand the nuances of perinatal mental health and how that differs from your standard mental health disorders.
Yeah.
And then the other really important thing to look for is a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner that's also been trained in the perinatal world. We hear way too often people coming to us because they are spiraling after being taken off of their medication because they got pregnant. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen. There are medications that are safe for pregnancy. But a lot of OBs and a lot of psychiatrists that aren't trained in psychiatric medications during pregnancy will say, well, now we have another liability with the baby that you're growing, and so it's best to just go off your medications. But the symptoms of anxiety, the symptoms of bipolar disorder that can happen during pregnancy can be far more dangerous than the medication.
I definitely had some of those experiences where you just feel so out of control. And look, thankfully, I wasn't on medication before, but man, when I finally got some help, of like, okay, it was like a night and day difference. And I feel like, it's all in what you don't know what you don't know in those early, especially your first pregnancy.
So, how we have dads that gain like sympathy weight during pregnancy. Do dads kind of share in this experience a little bit?
Yeah, so dads can experience postpartum depression and anxiety as well, and some during pregnancy too. Their whole world is changing, right? They're going through all these massive changes in responsibility, in knowing how to support their partner, in taking on the responsibility of a new life in their family. And that can really rock their world. And it can lead to about 10% of fathers will experience some sort of anxiety or depression during that process. It presents a little differently with dads. You're more likely to see irritability, withdrawing, dads who have a substance use history turning more to substance use, and just kind of a edginess that you don't see a lot of times with the moms. Obviously you do sometimes, right? Postpartum rage is a very real thing for women. But with women, you tend to see more the fears and the expression of sadness and worry and overwhelm. Guys tend to portray that more into irritability, anger, withdrawing, not wanting to express how they're feeling.
They're just too cool to embrace the feelings.
I think they feel a really, really massive amount of responsibility. And taking that on is scary.
Do you find that's more prevalent in first-time dads, or can this kind of universally affect any baby, whether it's your first baby or your third baby?
Like, oh my God, I got 5 kids now.
So it can affect any pregnancy, and just because you didn't have it with your first pregnancy doesn't mean you won't have it with your second. Now, if you did have a experience with it during a pregnancy, you are slightly more likely to experience it again. But it's really, every pregnancy is different and every experience is different. So much of it goes back to your support at the time, any complications with your baby, with your pregnancy, your birth experience. Birth trauma is very real and will definitely affect your postpartum experience as well. Some women will have PTSD from their birth, and a lot of times it's not looked at as traumatic from the outside, but anytime you are not feeling heard or validated during a medical procedure can lead to trauma, even if it was something that like was minor in the medical staff's view of things. If you didn't feel heard and validated and supported, that's going to lead to a trauma reaction.
For sure.
So tell me, what led you down this path? Have you just dreamed of, as a young girl, that you just wanted to do this line of work?
Yeah, so yes and no. I knew that from even being a little girl, like age 7, that I wanted to be involved in the whole family building process. Originally, I wanted to be a midwife. I was the weirdo 7-year-old that wanted to deliver babies. And then as I got older, I realized that I do not do well with the sight of blood. So I went into social work. I've always found psychology and sociology fascinating. And I kind of took the medical social work route. I worked in the NICU. I worked in the mother baby unit. I did medical foster care for a while. And then I had my own struggles with infertility and postpartum anxiety, and realized during that time that there was not a lot of support out there for women going through that. So after I had my second daughter, or my second child, I decided to go into private practice. Originally, I developed a mental health program for an OBGYN's office, and worked there for a while, and then we moved here to Louisiana. And so I opened my own private practice down here, and have really worked towards providing that support for women who are experiencing struggles.
Well, I'm happy that you decided to move down here. Well, I guess somewhat against your will, but
You can thank my husband, Shepherd, for that.
But, do you also thank social media kind of for making this so much more of a needed aspect, the perfectionism in what we see in social media, that like this postpartum body, this postpartum life of my house is all clean, or my mom came to live with me for a month to help me get my sleep and cook all my meals, and that's not everybody's reality. Like trying to live up to this perfect image of what we think postpartum life is like or pregnancy is like.
Absolutely. I think that our society for a very, very long time has had this idea of presenting motherhood as all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Right? And not everybody has that experience. I personally would venture to say nobody has that experience. But
I agree with that.
I don't want to be absolute with that.
Yeah.
But I think that when you go into it expecting this beautiful, magical moment at childbirth and this magical experience of raising a child, and the expectation that they're going to be your whole world and your whole life is going to revolve around them, it really sets you up for failure. And I think that social media took that one step further, because now it's not just the people around you and the stories and everything, but it's this news feed that is in your face and accessible all the time. And we're getting a little better with there being some accounts that kind of show the reality of motherhood, right? But the majority of them, all of it is staged. And so we're constantly being fed this information that we are supposed to be living up to these standards, and if we don't, we're failures. And that's hard.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, Instagram, we've talked about this before on other episodes where, everything, you get to pick it gets out there, right? Like you don't necessarily have to post that, you were up 4 times feeding your baby, but you're posting in your white robe and your baby that's swaddled in the matching set, and, and it's like, oh, everything's so magical. And it really does, I think, it sets so many people up for failure, because it's like, that is not what it's like for anybody. I'm with you. I don't think that it's like that for anybody. I just think you have some people who pick and choose what gets put out there, and you don't always see the reality.
Yeah, you see the picture of the mother in the white robe with her baby swaddled. What you don't see is the 3 outfit changes she had to do prior because the baby was spitting up on her, and the fact that she was up all night and couldn't console a crying baby, and that she and her husband are having this contentious relationship because of shifted roles and all of the things behind it.
For sure. It's so funny. There's photos that I look back on that, like, they're great photos, but I'm like, I don't like them because I knew what I was feeling on the inside in those photos. And I'm like, I remember feeling so bad that day for, whatever reason. We got in an argument, you were sleep deprived or whatever. And it's like, it's not always what it's cracked up to be.
Behind the scenes. For some reason, my oldest asked my mom for pictures of me when I was in high school. She couldn't find any, but she sent my daughter a picture of me when I was actually at my baby shower for her. And she was like, "Oh, you look so beautiful." And I was like, "Yeah, I couldn't fit in my shoes that day."
You remember all those little things.
You remember all those things. So as beautiful as certain things are, it doesn't make it any less hard. And I think
Sure.
that's the struggle of it can be hard, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, so that
It's
part.
okay to have a dichotomy of feelings, right? It's
Mhm.
okay to love motherhood and love your baby to the ends of the earth, but also feel like this is really hard and I'm not supported and I just don't feel good right now.
Yeah.
It's okay to have both of those at the same time.
So, what are some tips that you have to help moms who are struggling with the control aspect or the moves and the like all the things, but just some good tips to help them navigate through until they know that maybe they need a little bit more help, or these are just
Yeah, some
fixes.
good ways to kind of set yourself up for success.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always talk in my first session with new moms about making sure you're getting out in the sunshine every day, making sure you're moving your body every day, and that doesn't have to be anything extreme, right? But just even walking down a long driveway to get the mail or something, getting up and doing something with your body every day, getting decent sleep. And that's not only like the collective amount of sleep you're getting, but making sure you get at least one consecutive 3 hour stretch of sleep. So obviously, we want you to get more than 3 hours of sleep a night, right? But 3 of those hours have to be uninterrupted. And that's because that's when your body goes through a REM cycle
Mhm.
and kind of helps reset and process. So it processes everything that happened the day before and resets your cognitive functioning for the next day. So without that, you're kind of spiraling down into this inability to function mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And then making sure you're feeding yourself nutritious foods. I think a lot of times we're so focused on feeding the baby and taking care of all the things that we forget to feed ourselves in a healthy way.
Yeah.
We go and just grab a snack, we grab, whatever. And if your body doesn't have the nutrients, it's not going to function properly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, self-care, especially in that postpartum period and even during pregnancy, it's so underrated because so much focus is on the baby part of it, that you're bringing this new life in. And it's like you as mom are just as important, if not more important,
Right.
because it's, I kind of learned that the hard way, that if I didn't take care of me and do what I needed to do to be at my best, then it all of it spirals down to the baby and to the rest of your family, your husband, your other children. So
Yeah. The last big thing is support and boundaries. So making sure that you have a support system in place that if you could call and say, I need help, I need you to drop off dinner, can you come
Mhm.
hold the baby while I shower? And just having friends that will listen to you and validate you, that's important. But also knowing where to set boundaries. So if you have family that's wanting to come visit when you're exhausted, being able to say, no, now's not a good time.
Mhm.
If you have a relative or friend that is telling you how to do things when it goes against your instincts or against what you would like to do, making sure you have the boundary to say thanks, but I'm going to do it the way that I feel is right.
Mhm.
Those two kind of ends of the spectrum are really important to find a way to navigate.
That is
Yeah.
my favorite B word.
Boundaries.
Yeah, it's taken
They're
me
so
a long
important.
time to like embrace them and to feel
Mhm.
comfortable to say that, especially to um, a parent.
Mhm.
It's like, this is my journey, that like
Mhm.
it's okay to do it the way that I want to, even if it looks different than how
Sure.
you did it.
Yeah.
And to be able to stand up for those rights. But boundaries is, that's probably the best thing I've obtained in motherhood. Still working on it,
Absolutely.
but
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And women of our generation and generations prior to us, I think we're getting better moving forward, but we were raised to obey and people
Mhm.
please and just kind of follow the rules and stay in our lane,
Yeah.
right? And so when somebody else comes in and says, no, you should do it this way, it's very easy to be like, okay, right?
Yeah.
I guess I got to make them happy. I guess I got to do that. But when you can set those boundaries and take care of
Mhm.
yourself, it makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, that I agree with you. When you said you're like, that's the best thing I got out of parenting, 100%. Like you think that boundary line, you really realize how important it is. It's
Mhm.
always been important, but when you have a child, you're like, oh, it's really important
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
So
Because you don't want them to fall into those same traps
yeah.
of, following along if you know that that's hurting them more mentally than it is to just stand up and say what they feel that they want to do.
Yeah.
But if someone wants to reach out to you, or they feel like they need a couple more extra tips, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so my private practice is called the Maternal Wellness Clinic, and we're located here in Baton Rouge. I'm actually part of a larger collective. There's, gosh, I think we're up to 9 therapists now that all share a space. We all have our own practices, but we all share a space, and we run groups together and do a lot of kind of community outreach, trainings, different things together as a group. Our collective is called Baton Rouge Perinatal Counseling Collective, and we have a website, and you can find all of the information on that website. We also have a guy therapist with us who works with a lot of our dads, and
That's
he's really
awesome.
awesome. So if a dad is struggling, we have that for them as well. We run a lot of groups around like transitioning into motherhood, an infertility group, a pregnancy and infant loss group. So even if you feel like you need that support and a network of people who know what you're experiencing, we can provide that as well.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
So you have a daughter,
I do.
and then one day you'll have a daughter-in-law or grandchildren. What do you think being in this line of work will help you whenever you're supporting, your daughter if she chooses to have children? Because I think that's another thing.
Sure.
If you want to have children, you don't
Sure.
have to.
Yeah,
If you want
absolutely.
to.
I think that's a good question. I think that the biggest thing is being able to provide a safe space for them to express their feelings without them worrying about being judged, about the pressure of input that they don't want, right? Just giving them that space to say, hey, I'm here. I'm here to support you. You can
Yeah.
talk to me at any time. And if you want my advice, I'm happy to give it.
That's awesome.
And then making sure they're getting sleep and getting nutrition and all of those things as well.
It takes a village in those days for sure. So, to have somebody to come in and say, go take a nap, I'm going to hold the baby. If that's what you want me to do, I'm going to help you get that sleep.
Absolutely.
So,
Or just showing up and saying, what do you need right now?
yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. For sure. Well, I loved this topic. I clearly had tons of personal questions. I'm like, let me ask all of this good stuff. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode. I think that this is it's a topic that's polarizing, and truly we need to be talking about it more, because that was my experience. No one is talking about this, and it is a big deal, and it is very common, and clearly more common than I even realized. 1 out of 3. So hopefully that this helps, and if you need help and you're in Baton Rouge, reach out to Michelle. If you don't, she's provided, we'll link those websites that you provided earlier, so that they can find a provider in their area.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Awesome.
See you guys later.
Bye.